A couple things. I did develop a POAP for this, and if you're just arriving, you may not have seen the code for it, but please stick around. I will post it again after my talk, or at the end of my talk, and I want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to claim that. And so hopefully you see my slide deck now, why I fight for decentralization. I'll be honest, I didn't know the audience, and so I'm hearing developers, and so you know, my experience with ETH Denver is developers doesn't mean beacon chain developers. It means developers in all of Ethereum, and it's a really wide net. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't assume everyone had a background context with the beacon chain. And then it turns out that like half of you are beacon chain developers. So that's really great. I am excited though to connect more closely with ChainSafe. Like we've had a couple interactions, but I haven't really felt like we've become friends yet. So I'm excited about that opportunity now. So yeah, I'm superphiz.eth. I work with EthStaker. It's a made up organization. We don't, I like to think of it as a public good. We do receive a small grant from the EF, but we're really just a bunch of community members who want to improve the beacon chain. I am in love with Twitter right now. I do spend a lot of time on Reddit and on Discord. One of the things, oh, I love the Get POAP shirt, Phil. Thank you. I was trying to find mine, but it's dirty, so I had to wear my Frontier Ethereum shirt. Sorry.
We're friends now.
Yes, we are. And actually, I do follow the chat. I will try to follow the chat. So if you have anything to say and you don't want to interrupt me, please feel free to say it there. My intention is 8 slides, 4 interesting graphics, and about 20 minutes. I need to know before I enter a slide deck like what I'm getting into, because it's like, when's it gonna end? Things I like to talk about: rocket pool, POAP, staking, Get POAP, and decentralization. So if you want to be my friend, those are the things you bring up, and we'll be buddies. So this is 8 slides, 4 interesting graphics. What is decentralization in Ethereum? And so it refers to the extent that Ethereum validators and the beacon chain are free to and independently to resist the control of actions that might harm the network. We have this idea of what centralization is. It's, you know, when everyone has all the hash power or everyone owns all the validators. And that's very much a surface level approach. A lot of people here are familiar with the Nakamoto coefficient, and that's something I don't actually talk about. It's not. It's valuable from some frames of reference, but it doesn't line up with my needs, and I'll get into that in a minute. You might know proof of work requires 51% of the hash power to initiate a substantial attack on a chain. With the beacon chain, 66% is required to really affect finality or change finality to the outcome of finality. There are within that some other cutoffs, but I feel like people really recognize, they can keep in mind, you know, that one major number, and 66% is the thing that we really need to avoid on the beacon chain. When we do dissolve the current supermajority client, then we'll talk about other goals, but right now we're shooting for 66%. And the reason this is so important, I'm not here for the money, but the thing that I use to sell decentralization to people who are interested in the money is that decentralization underpins the value of the Ethereum network. If we are not a decentralized network, or if we're subject to attack or manipulation, then the network has no value. And so if you value the network, if you want the value of your Ether to continue to grow, if you want your dApps to work, if you want immutability, then decentralization is important to you, whether you know it or not. And kind of one of my favorite things, decentralization is not this neatly packaged concept. Right now, I talk a lot about client diversity. When it's on, you know, when we're in proof of work, we talk about mining pools who hold an unusual share of the hash rate. But as I learn more and more about decentralization, I recognize that it's not one thing. It is tens or hundreds of layers of decentralization that we need to be aware of and keep an eye on. That's kind of a relatively new idea for me. So why do we care about it? One thing I've noticed when in my Twitter discussions with operators or engaging with operators is they love to use it as a buzzword. Large exchanges love to talk about, oh, we're decentralized because we have 2 data centers running our validators. We as a community have this huge responsibility to not let decentralization become a buzzword, but instead to really consider it when we're looking at operators and when people give us words. We cannot take the word decentralization at face value. We have to really take it apart and say, okay, so large exchange, you're decentralized. What does that mean to you? And kind of take that apart. Here's the reason I don't get too obsessed with a Nakamoto coefficient. I love Ethereum. I am an ETH maxi, at least for now. That may change in 5 years if something better comes along. I used to be a Bitcoin maxi. It's not because I want to be tribal. It's because I tend to follow what I believe is the best technology. But as an ETH maxi, I am not here competing with other chains. Like, I'm not interested in decentralization on Bitcoin or Solana or Avalanche. I think that the best path to success is to compete against yourself, because as currently we are the most decentralized chain. If we were to say, well, we're the most decentralized, we don't have to do anything else, it would be a fool's errand. Decentralization is one of those things that you can never stop working toward, even when by some measures you've achieved it. And so some of these slides are going to, they're not going to be warm fuzzy. You're going to say, crap, I didn't want to know that. I don't want people to know about that because it weakens us. And the reality is that as a strong, powerful chain, we can acknowledge our weaknesses and we can work together to harden them. To hide our weakness, to be ashamed of it, means that we're powerless. And so I'm happy to share information about the weaknesses in decentralization in Ethereum, because I know that as a community, we can harden those weaknesses. If we hide them, we'll never grow. And again, I mentioned this last time, if we fail, if we screw up decentralization, the network loses the trust it has acquired, it loses the value it has acquired. And as I like to tell my friends, it turns out we were all just playing a game anyway. And so I'm not playing a game. I'm serious about the health of this network, and I'm willing to point out the things that need to be improved. And admittedly, I do that. I'm more likely to do that with friends than I am to promote it, for people who would antagonize us. So the next 4 slides are different facets of decentralization. And I'm going to talk about 4 of them, even though I acknowledge there are hundreds of facets. I guarantee you there are even facets of decentralization that exist that I haven't thought of, that you haven't thought of, that are in more need of attention than these. But this is where we're going to start. So this is from Ethereum Pools, a Twitter channel. If you don't follow Ethereum Pools yet, I highly suggest it. Ethereum Pools combine their data with Invisible Symbol, and we have this operator diversity. And so as the self-proclaimed Ethereum beacon chain health consultant, I believe that no operator should exercise control over more than 20% of the validators. And I didn't make that up myself. It's after some conversations with other leaders and other people who have a good grasp on this. And so you can see right now, Lido has 20% of the network, Coinbase has 17%, and Kraken 11%. We're approaching this place where if we want to maintain the health of the network, we have to do 2 things. We have to make Lido aware of this need, and hopefully get them on board with that recognition and say, okay, we need to slow down so that the network can remain healthy, because there are other players who are also acting in good faith who can take some validators. And the second thing, that's the carrot approach. The stick approach is to educate users. The operators don't want users to be educated about these risks. They want it quiet, because as long as it's quiet, they can continue to grow in peace. And so as community advocates, our job then becomes to say, hey, wait, this needs to change. We need to put the brakes on. We care about the community, about the network, and this is what needs to happen. What I always like to say is, operators like Lido, they have, I don't know how many employees Lido has. They have a lot of employees who spend a lot of their time every day fighting for centralization. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Lido is a good provider. They have good client diversity, but they are trying to gain more control of the network. That is their job. That's what they're doing. And I'm not against that, but as the counterparty to that, we need to make sure that they do not gain too much control and that everything remains balanced, because unless they are a truly, what's the word for doing, somebody help me with this word here. When you do good things without repayment.
Altruistic?
Yeah, unless they're truly altruistic, they're not going to say, hey, we need to slow down here. Of course, we all recognize that if they get too big, it's a threat to everyone. So that is operator diversity. It's the first of four facets I want to describe today. Others in this generally, so it's one of two cases. It's either independent operators or unidentified operators. But we don't believe that there are any other major unidentified operators at this time. Coinbase was hiding in the network. This guy, OX Invis, was able to ferret out those Coinbase validators. So I think it's reasonable to believe that those others are, for the most part, small or, independent operators. So this is my second. So first we had operator diversity, and I want to talk about client diversity just for a second. This is data that just became available to us on February 3rd. Right now it's a month old. And before this, we literally had no hard evidence what validator client Coinbase, Kraken, and the other operators were running. And so as EthStaker, trying to reduce the use of a supermajority client, I spent a lot of time talking to individuals like, hey, if you're a home staker and you're running Prism, will you consider changing to something else? I literally spent, I would say, a year under that misunderstanding that home validators, that 28%, where we see here, this 28% would actually be able to reduce this supermajority client to something more reasonable. I need to zoom out for anyone who doesn't know what I mean when I mean supermajority client. There are five. We're with Lodestar now. I'm going to say 5. There are 5, and I'll tell you. I want to say this just as a segue. The reason I do not typically include Lodestar, my standard has been waiting until it's on the launch pad, and when it's listed on the launch pad, that has been like my standard, and that's absolutely no disrespect to Lodestar. I'm really glad you guys are here, and I can't wait to see you grow. I just have had that standard for a while. So there are 5 beacon chain clients: Lodestar, Prism, Teku, Nimbus, and Lighthouse. And ideally, they would have a relatively equal distribution of those clients on the network. Thank you, Phil. But right now, well, actually, since the beginning of the beacon chain, a majority of the operators have run Prism. And that's, it's a testament to Prism's success, but it's not healthy for the network. And so EthStaker, one of our goals has been to try to help dissolve that supermajority and restore some parity to those clients. We weren't successful for a long time. Then we finally got this data that tells us, Coinbase is running 50,000 validators. This is out of 300,000. 50,000 validators on Prism, and Kraken is running 30,000 validators on Prism. And we're like, oh, now we get it. That was a lot of misdirected effort. And so obviously now we're working with those operators to encourage them, really to add some public pressure to say, if you value the Ethereum network, you really need to switch away from Prism, because a failure to do so and a fault in the network could lead to severe penalties. I'm not here to talk about penalties. I'm here to talk about decentralization. So client diversity means that out of the 5 Beacon Chain clients, we want to look for each one to have about 25%. And obviously that's 125%, but really, we just want to balance that out. So we have operator diversity, client diversity, and geopolitical diversity. This is one that a lot of people don't think about a lot. And again, the next 2 slides both come from ChainSafe's nodewatch.io. It's a fantastic resource. Yeah, thanks. So I don't want to say you all, ChainSafe, but NodeWatch has basically cataloged IPs of nodes on the network and created this heat map for us. And if you don't recognize this as a weakness, then so obviously we need to have geopolitical diversity in the Beacon chain. That means that Russia shouldn't be black. Africa, and actually I meant to say Africa first, and I said Russia first because it's the on the tip of everyone's tongue right now. South America, Australia, Canada, Great Britain, we really need to, even the Middle East, India. I'm showing my geography skills. The Beacon chain should not be controlled by 2 primary heat spots on the map. As people who value the health of the network, we need to push these validators out to smaller regions. The idea here being that if there's a fissure in the network, if there's a broken cable, if there's a whatever kind of situation that could take out a large portion of validators, geopolitical diversity tells us that we need to be resilient to that and able to bounce back quickly. Based on this map, if the Eastern US or Europe were somehow knocked off the map, our network would grind to a halt pretty quickly. We can be resilient against that if we choose to work in that direction, and I believe we should. So operator, client, geopolitical, and finally hosting diversity. This is one that, where'd I go? This is one that might be the easiest to fix. I don't know. Well, they're all, if we put effort into them, relatively easy to fix. Again, from NodeWatch, NodeWatch is showing 65% of validators hosted in data centers and 35% at home. Now, I want to say I'm very proud that there are 35% of validators running at home. I honestly, you might say, well, that's not enough. It's not even half. But to get individual people to fire up a computer at home and run a validator at home, that's an impressive feat. And so the important message here is if you're running an AWS, let's say 65% are running an AWS, and I know they're not all running with the same cloud provider, but if it goes down, it has the potential to severely harm the network. And so it's very important that as decentralization enthusiasts, that we encourage people to get those validators at home. A lot of that has to do with the simplicity of running a validator. I really promote validator UX, Beacon Chain UX. I look forward, and I believe there will be a time when it will be as easy as running a toaster. It's really, it sounds funny, but if anybody has run a modern ASIC, like you essentially order an ASIC, wait until the factory mines its worth and then ships it to you, and then you plug it in and you're going. Yeah, I really believe that for the health of the network, staking on the Beacon chain needs to be that easy. And so I described 4 layers: operator, client, geopolitical, and hosting. There are also things like governance of the chain, like who creates the software that we run. When we're looking at things like the client implementation team, like how diverse are they? Actually pretty diverse right now with a bunch of teams. Exchanges being a centralizing point as an on-ramp and off-ramp. ISPs have the potential to be a centralizing feature. The truth is, it's important not to think about what's right in front of us, but to think about centralizing features that we haven't considered yet. And so that's kind of a great brainstorming exercise. And so you guys, you're developers, what can you do? I want you to join Layer 0. That is the community layer. That's EthStaker. Those are people who are talking about the need for decentralization. Decentralization is not a hard-coded, it's not a variable on the network. It's something that we have to spread through Layer 0. And so as people who are knowledgeable about the Beacon chain, it's important for us to do that. Developers can build and publish tools that monitor different facets of decentralization. I love what NodeWatch has done. There are a lot of other great sites. I showed you pools.invis.cloud. We looked at data from Ethereum pools on Twitter. Building those tools that bring light to our decentralization weaknesses or our centralizing weaknesses give us an opportunity as a community to say, we got to work on that. Because ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It only makes it worse. Hiding it doesn't make us stronger. It makes us weaker. Those are things we need to acknowledge. And contribute to decentralization by staking at your home with your own Ether. You don't have to have 32 Ether. If you have 16 Ether, you can use Rocket Pool. If you have less than that, you can stake as a fractional RETH holder. The most decentralized way you can stake is great for the network. Baby. And so, yeah, that's it. I think I went about 20 minutes, and I really feel like I shared my passion for decentralization. That's kind of what I know.
No, that was great, Fizz. Yeah, you really highlighted a very important issue for the Ethereum network, and thank you for giving us a presentation on the layers of decentralization. Really appreciate it. We have some questions. I know, Phil, you had some questions for Fizz, but I have one question. Is your name Fizz? Is it Phil? Is that something you're willing to share, or you prefer going by Superphiz?
I do prefer to go by Fizz. My name is Hank. It's not a terrible secret, but I do not use it in this, and it's just not who I know myself as here. Right. So I'm most comfortable with Fizz.
Nice, totally fair. Fizz is. And Phil, did you want to ask Fizz some questions? Or do you want me to read them off?
No, definitely. No, I want to start with the larger pool operators and exchanges, because one of the things that I've been actually researching to try and see how we can promote using Lodestar more in some of these other sort of larger pools is, do you know what maybe the main concerns for larger pool operators like exchanges and stuff, like what's stopping them from having a multi-client node setup to promote diversity?
Yes. So the things that I understand, the first go-to argument is lack of a remote signer. But we know that Teku has had a remote signer since the beginning. We know that Lighthouse has since added a remote signer. In many ways, that should have been enough for operators to change. We know that operators are practically unwilling to change historical validators. Even though it takes 13 minutes to switch them over, it makes sense to me, but of course, I don't have billions of dollars at stake. So from some perspectives, I respect that. We do know we've had a commitment from Kraken that their new onboarded validators will run a different client. We've had some willingness from Coinbase to examine the issue. And while I haven't spoken with them personally, I'm told that Binance is actively switching clients. So yeah, the two things, well, there's a third thing. It's lack of understanding of the consequences. Many large operators or the clients who own the ETH that run on those operators aren't aware of anti-correlation penalties or how they work. They may be under the impression that running the best client is running the biggest client. And obviously, anyone who knows about the chain knows that your likelihood of being slashed is highest your loss during a slashing event is highest if you're running a supermajority client that faults. So it's interesting, Antoine. We hear a lot of people goad me into like, don't you hate Prism? And I'm like, no, Prism is great. I love Prism. That's why 90% of the time you'll hear me refer to it as a supermajority client, because once we dissolve this supermajority, there's nothing preventing another one. And so I don't want people to turn away from Prism. I want people to turn toward client diversity. Notice other chains have the same. No. And so this is one of the reasons people have poked at the beacon chain model is this is a problem you brought on yourself by having multiple implementations. Again, this is a strength, not a weakness. And so with a monoculture implementation, bugs are hidden, and essentially the client is the spec. And so whatever that client says goes. Ethereum has a much more robust spec, and the spec drives the implementation. That means that clients like Lighthouse, or I'm sorry, like Lodestar, or even Grandine can sort of pick up midstream and say, hey, we want to run a client, follow the spec, write to the spec, and then interact with a chain. The spec-driven model is a much better approach, I believe. Yeah. Phil, you want to tell us about Light Client?
Yeah, I can just do like a quick summary on it. Basically, as you probably even know today, Infura did block some IP addresses from some nations that had been sanctioned by the US and stuff like that. So you can imagine Infura as sort of like the AWS to sort of access to the Ethereum API. So this is increasingly becoming a problem, and also the fact that it does take hardware resources to actually run a node. Imagine a world where any device can actually pull information and trustlessly verify blockchain data. So that's the sort of future we envision with Light clients, and that's what we're pushing for. And not to necessarily put Infura out of business, but give people options and choice.
Yeah, well, it is. Decentralization is all about having choices. It's about Ethereum not going down because Infura stopped working, and that's the perception a lot of people have. So Eric asked, is operator diversity important if they have client diversity underneath? Yes. We need decentralization on all of the layers. And Lido is a perfect example of this. Lido has great client diversity under the hood, but as an operator that has a growing share of the network, we still need to make sure that they are that they're not taking over the network. So yeah, I don't think there are any more, or unless there are any more questions, I'm going to wrap it up. I do appreciate everyone giving me the chance to rant. If you didn't have a chance to claim the POAP, I'm going to share it one more time, and I look forward to hearing Antoine.
Sweet. Fiz, thank you so much for presenting again. Hope to have more conversations like this between ChainSafe and the team over at EthStaker. So yeah, thank you again. And
that's great. Thanks.